Welcome back. WNST busy lately, chronicling the awfulness of the Orioles, and I will be putting together a bunch of letters to management and others in the Oriole organization when I get bored watching the World Cup next month. In the meantime, I had horse racing last week, a little hockey this week, and certainly we've had a lot of NFL with the Joe Flacco, Lamar Jackson wars. But this guy's got a real beat. He does this for a living in Boston, and he's been on a lot of beats, and he is the curator, editor, publisher, and poobah of Boston Sports Journal. That's BSJ. He is a longtime insider at Sports Illustrated and a bunch of other places covering the National Football League. Somehow he's on the basketball beat now in Cleveland as well with the Boston Celtics. Never a dull moment in the Boston area. We welcome Greg A. Bedard on from Boston Sports Journal, and I know you're on the basketball beat. I'm calling because the baseball team doesn't suck. If the puck would have gone the other way, maybe I would have been in Boston the last couple of weeks running around on the ice with you, but you're a busy cat, Bedard. I appreciate you making some time, and I hope things are going well at your venture at Boston Sports Journal, my friend.
Yeah, so far so good, and, Nestor, this is what happens when you live in a real sports town with teams that actually win a lot and things like that.
You can pick up any mud you want to start this conversation. Look, man, I can't make excuses for where the Orioles are, but I can bring on people like you. I had Nick Cafardo on, who did a takedown last weekend in his Sunday Notes of Angelos and what this disaster is. But then it comes through your hometown, right? Like Bruce Springsteen, like death to my hometown and, my city of ruins. And, when the Red Sox come here, you see how empty the ballpark is night after night. We see a vibrant baseball operation up there. Certainly the Red Sox never take a day off, right? And we see that this weekend as the kid that we dealt there a few years ago to reach for the catcher in the rye brass ring that we can't get, and then he sticks the bats up our backside for 7 innings on a Sunday afternoon. Such is life in Baltimore, but the Red Sox don't, it never ends there, and the money and all of that sort of feeds into it. Here we go again, them and the Yankees all over again for the next 5 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have a tough time explaining what's going on, with the Red Sox. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit I remember the press conference in spring training when John Henry and Tom Werner got out there and they basically threw John Farrell under the bus and talked about how they expected everything to be better, even though they didn't really add anybody in the offseason. They expected the team to be much better because their hitting approach was going to change, and also because Alex Cora was going to be a better communicator. And at the time, you were like, "What are these guys smoking? They're totally clueless. They have no idea what's going on." And lo and behold, they're leading the majors in wins. They're leading the majors in home runs with essentially the same lineup. And
all these first-time managers too, right? Philadelphia with Gabe Kapler, and I mean, there's something to all this nerdery of you and I hanging out with the Theo Epsteins and all the analytics guys that in baseball it worked out better than it did for the Browns.
yeah, that's for sure. I think analytics, goes into it, but I also think, and there's also some parallels that you can draw with Brad Stevens with the Celtics. I think these younger coaches, I think there's something to be said for these younger coaches who know how to communicate with these younger athletes, and because I think it's a huge chore for a lot of these old school guys to sort of relate to these new younger athletes that just look at what we just went through with the Red Sox with David Price is playing too much Fortnite. I mean, I don't think that. What's his name, Francona had to deal with that very much with the Red Sox teams that won here, or Earl Weaver had to deal with that with the Orioles. And
it was ping pong in that era, right? It was too much ping pong in the locker room or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's what you say when you suck. When you're playing 700 ball, Dennis Eckersley on the plane's not a problem this season, right? Like literally, right?
Right. Well, mostly because X said basically, screw these guys, I'm not dealing with them anymore, and he's basically taken himself out of the equation. He hasn't done any road trips so far, and he just announced a game or a couple this weekend, and that's been it for him.
I thought that was an unseemly story to come out of everything last year on a winning team, right? I mean, the Red Sox and the Yankees both threw decorated managers, guys who had won over the side of the boat, and none the worse for it, right? I mean, certainly they have the players, they have the pitchers, they have the payroll, they have the pipeline. Certainly the Yankees have the young talent after their sell-off a year and a half ago. That it feels like they're on a different planet than where the Blue Jays are, the Rays are, and the Orioles. Like two different leagues. And I don't know, certainly around here, what's going to change the circumstance here to run and catch these teams. But I guess if you're a baseball purist or you live in those markets, it's a lot of fun to watch, right? I don't know if it's any fun for us to watch right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it before. I mean, I feel bad for the Orioles fans. I mean, those have always been traditionally for years some of the best baseball fans in the country, and to deal with what they have to deal with these teams of late, and the prospect of them selling off Machado and some of their good bullpen arms. I mean, it's just it's hard to see how things get turned around, especially under the current ownership group.
He is Greg A. Bedard out on Twitter, and you can follow along with everything they do at the Boston Sports Journal at BSJ as well, and bostonsportsjournal.com, where he's chasing the Celtics around, and we'll get to that in a minute. But football's your gig, right? And that's always, what I think of you. I think of the Patriots and covering that and Sports Illustrated, where we are. This Ravens story with Flacco and Lamar Jackson, we've never really had one of these here, right? Like this incumbent Super Bowl. Maybe we had it with Unitas and Marty Domrez in 1973 when they dealt him off to San Diego and he could barely walk. But Flacco's not at that point. The fans have made a lot of this. Clearly the media's piling into this at this point, and Lamar Jackson's off doing his rookie camps and all this, and there hasn't been a whole lot of communication. But I don't know what to make of this. I've thrown Flacco a few notes. Flacco hasn't said anything to anybody that I'm aware of. Nothing's leaked out. But at some point, questions will be asked, and this is always an uncomfortable situation. And I would think Boston's about to get uncomfortable because Brady and Belichick are both, entering the, the December of their. I don't know where the end is when you've got an incumbent 42-year-old quarterback that probably should have won another Super Bowl a few weeks ago, right? Here we go again. But at some point, the end comes, whether it's Garoppolo or, whether it's Bledsoe for Brady as it was in your generation. But it's never pretty when this happens, right?
No, and, as far as the Patriots go, we'll see on Tuesday. This story could take a next step if Tom Brady, who hasn't been at any of the off-season workouts, Tuesday is the first time the media gets to view these practices, and it's going to be, a bad look for Brady, in my opinion, if he's not out there and the media is watching and we have to watch Brian Hoyer and some, slappy camp arms out there throwing to Patriots receivers. And so we'll have to see what happens. But, as far as the Ravens, I'm sure a lot of people are making a lot out of it, down there. But, in my interactions with, first of all, I thought that the Ravens made the right decision. They needed to at least get moving in another direction. Flacco wasn't going to last forever, and they had to make a choice. They made a choice. They drafted Lamar Jackson. And, in my dealings with Joe over the years, maybe he hasn't said anything, and I'm sure people are reading a lot into that, but I wouldn't. I think that Joe, when he shows up and when he is asked questions about this, he's going to be a true professional. I expect him to be one of those quarterbacks that does help his understudy. And, to tell you the truth, from watching the Patriots the previous 5 years up close, I'll tell you what, I don't think Tom Brady is MVP at age 40 if it wasn't for Jimmy Garoppolo. He was starting, his stats were starting to flounder. All of a sudden they drafted Garoppolo. It kicked Brady into another gear. He really got into TB12 stuff and taking care of himself. And, it made him a better player and really set the stage for the final act of his career. And, it's the NFL. It's either you compete or you're going to be gone. And I expect Joe to compete. I expect him to get to his more true level than what we've seen the past couple of years. And I think the Ravens will have a good quarterback situation on their hand.
For you with Brady and the TB12 and Belichick and Kraft and where all the drama was last year, what's the truth and what's fiction there? And I know you're always trying to separate that Boston Sports Journal for everybody, having been on the inside of all this, and everybody's looking for information about how the relationship works there. But where is that at this point?
Yeah, I've done a lot of reporting on it. I was one of the first guys that I talked about it on radio, that there were, especially about Guerrero and other things going on. But, it really started with Guerrero, and that, Belichick, and I understand where he's coming from. I understand where Brady's coming from. I mean, if it's one thing to say, okay, well, Tom Brady can do whatever he wants because he's Tom Brady, but it would be fine if Alex Guerrero, Tom's TB12 guru, was just working with Tom. But all of a sudden, it's Rob Gronkowski, it's about 20 other Patriots, and suddenly this guy's wielding a lot of power, and he's using it. And so Belichick was just like, what am I supposed to do about this? And at the end of the day, he just said, you know what? We're going to separate church and state a little bit. And, Alex can't be here. He can't be on the team plane, but people can be treated at TB12. And, I can understand Gronkowski and Brady and others sort of chafing in that and being like, really, I've been doing all this for the team, and you're going to bust my chops over my trainer. And so it sort of started there. And, there was stuff about, Brady wasn't directly responsible for Garoppolo being traded, but there's some diva in him, right? Like right? I mean, behind no question.
Closed doors, he's not the most humble dude, right? And he's a special, weird Michael Jordan kind of cut your throat kind of guy, which is how you do this at 41, right? I mean, there's something behind that, right?
Yeah, I mean, guy. I wouldn't, I would say that, from people behind the scenes, they said that, Brady's been a little bit more about himself the past couple of years. And, I think that's directly related to TB12. He's out there selling it, and he's got a business. And, he used to be, we're talking about a guy that in his heyday, he didn't do anything off the field. He was all football. He didn't do any commercials. He didn't do any of this stuff. And suddenly now he has his own business. He's taking off-season workouts to spend time with his family. He's in ads for Aston Martin and other things that I can't afford. And, it's a different deal. But, it's hard to argue with the results. But I will say that, not only was Guerrero the genesis of this, but also, and Belichick brought this on himself because, Tom wanted to know that he was going to be the quarterback. He was talking until 45. He wanted to know at least for the next 2 or 3 years he was going to be the starting quarterback. And Belichick just wouldn't give him the contract extension that would give him some security. And so, Brady
because
was
it's never been done before, like literally, right? Like, who would give a 39-year-old? I mean, any 39-year-old quarterback. I mean, it's almost far-fetched. It's almost otherworldly, right? Like if we had been talking about this 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I mean, but I do see Brady's point from the amount of money that he saved the team over the years. When Kraft came to him after losing in the Super Bowl or losing to the Ravens in the AFC Championship game that year, a few years ago, Kraft went to him and said basically like, we're not going to have a quarterback take up 20-25% of our salary cap. We're just not going to do that. So you have to make a choice. Do you want to take less and be surrounded by better talent, or do you want to make money? Because if you do, then we might have to part ways. And Brady was on board, so he's giving them discounts, and he just wanted a little bit of security, and he just wasn't getting that. So he was in Kraft's ear, and then suddenly, lo and behold, they go from we're not trading Jimmy Garoppolo for four first-round picks to, hey, San Francisco, you want him for 2? I mean, so there were some things going on behind the scenes, and there's some things that still need to be worked out. There's a lot of hard feelings there. I expect them to have some clearing of the air at some point before training camp, and they'll get on the right page, and they'll be in the AFC Championship game again.
Maybe literally and figuratively, if Jimmy Garoppolo becomes Steve Young or what that represented after Montana, and he does that elsewhere, and the Patriots, let's say, go into the tank and don't turn things around so well, that will be kind of a seminal moment for the franchise, right? That they went with Brady in the same way the Phillies went with Ryan Howard, right? Like literally where you will be 2 or 3 years from now if Garoppolo becomes a top 5 quarterback in the sport. That would, maybe the end of the story wouldn't be as good as it is right now, because how long is he going to play, Greg? I mean, really, like how many more 16-game seasons does he have in him?
I think if things don't change and he's doesn't feel the proper respect. I think he's got 2 more years left. I mean, but, if all of a sudden Belichick leaves and Josh McDaniels is the head coach, then maybe we're talking another couple years. But, I don't put anything by that guy. I mean, he's incredible. He looks younger now than he did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Whatever they're doing, it's working. I mean, hopefully it's legal.
T beats Wells. Well, that was one of the things I was thinking about with Guerrero. What happens the first time somebody pisses dirty? Like, literally. Then the whole kingdom comes down, right? Like, literally. I got to say, I'm watching this, and I scratch my head. I mean, after watching Clemens, after watching the whole baseball thing that I was around all the time. I mean, Brady Anderson runs our baseball franchise here, dude. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a punchline unto itself at this point. But, I mean, are we going to look back 10 years from now, look back on Brady with – I mean, they've done everything to cheat as an organization, right? I mean, other organizations think that they have microphones and hidden cameras in their locker rooms, for crying out loud. So this does smell sort of weird outside of New England. I got to admit to you.
It does, and I can understand being outside, people thinking that, but, when you see Tom and how lean he is now, you're like, well, there's no way this guy's on any sort of steroids or anything like that. I just think it's the way he eats, the way he hydrates, all the stuff he talks about. I believe it. I'm a believer in it, and I think it's working for him, and it's starting to work for Gronk. Wait till you see Gronk come preseason and stuff like that. You're going to see a trimmed down Gronk also, and we'll have to see how that sort of affects him as a player, if it does at all.
Hanley Ramirez now on the same sauce as well. I saw that as well. You can find Greg Bedard at Greg A. Bedard out on Twitter, as well as at the Boston Sports Journal, where he is also an entrepreneur and doing crazy things there with all the sports in the Boston area, including the little basketball team. Big picture here for where they are. I mean, I on the outside, I just think, well, in the end, it'll be LeBron and it'll be Golden State, because that's the way it always is. Celtics are giving it a run here, and on a day-by-day basis, on any given day, they can beat this team by 30 points, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just think I'm a big believer in, Brad Stevens, his system, and also, the guys that they've accumulated. I mean, to not have Gordon Hayward and have Kyrie without Kyrie Irving, it'd be 2 wins away, from the finals or whatnot. I mean, it's unreal. And you just think of next year when they have everybody back. I mean, what's it going to look like? I mean, you're talking about a team that could be a legitimate threat to Golden State to end Golden State's run, and we'll just have to see what happens.
Last thing for you, and I guess this is sort of tying the whole thing together. Since we've been on the line now, we've talked about Lamar Jackson pushing Joe Flacco. We've talked about Jimmy Garoppolo pushing Tom Brady, and Tom Brady pushing Rob Gronkowski, and all of that stuff. Here in Baltimore, nobody pushes the Orioles, right? So, they never really get better. Much like the Marlins, they ban people like me from asking questions and all that sort of stuff. Boy, the whole Boston thing and what you're into up there and writing about this, it feels to me like the Bruins feel like the lost stepchild to not be playing even further than they did. The Red Sox are going to win 100 games. The Patriots are into their second decade of incredible dominance where the bar is so high, and here come the Celtics. It really is a push thing there that, the Orioles are in Chicago this week. We're watching the White Sox, sweep the cellar. Boy, it's tough to be in a big market when you stink, right? I mean, really, really stink and go away. And in Boston, boy, season to season, paycheck to paycheck, skybox to skybox, there's a lot of push for the oxygen in the room there, right?
Yeah, and I actually, some of the sports talk radio chatter, a few weeks ago was, which team has the better future? And, a lot of people said the Patriots came in last among that,
wow.
Considering that Brady and Belichick are coming to the end. But, I mean, the Bruins are in great shape, the Celtics, the Red Sox. I mean, it's just, it's a heyday in Boston right now, and, you're waiting for one of the teams to falter, and it's just not happening. I mean, I thought the Bruins were going to be going to the Stanley Cup Finals, and the Celtics were going to be out earlier, and that just hasn't worked out.
Well, you know why the Bruins aren't going anywhere, because they had a guy licking guys' faces. So, F the Bruins. And, even if the Capitals spit down there, and they might this week, I mean, I don't have any thought that they're really going to win the Stanley Cup. I'm hoping, but if they don't, at least no one licked anyone, okay? I mean, just remember that. So you started.
I think you should print up those T-shirts. At least we don't lick anybody.
At least we don't lick anybody, and that you deserve to go out in the second round. What did you make of that? I mean, I've been around sports a long time. I've seen cheap shots. I've seen, look, I mean, you've covered more cheaters up there, just out in the parking lot. Allegedly. I mean, you've covered deflated balls as a 2-year Watergate investigation. We can't even get Trump investigated to that level around here. But what did you think of licking? That's a new one, right? That's beyond gross. Yes.
Yeah, I did not like it at all, and it was a tough look, and I thought he should have been suspended or something and it's just a shame because Brad Marchand is, if they're outside of the extracurricular stuff that he does, which is some of it's part of who he is and how he got to be great, but, you're talking about a 5'9", 180-pound, nothing really physically guy who just he's gone from being a fourth liner to he is truly one of the elite players in the NHL, and you just, as a Bruins fan and having watched his whole career and being a Marchand fan, you just wish he'd get to the point where he just stopped that nonsense because he should be appreciated as a player. I mean, we're talking about in the last.
How do you cheer a guy like that for the rest of his career? Like literally walks into. I mean, it's unfathomable. I mean, from the Bruins standpoint, that they would not make this stop. It's disgraceful. It really is.
Yeah, you could tell from the way Marchand talked after the season was over, and he talked about how he needs to knock that stuff off, that somebody from the Bruins sat him down finally, and they've done this multiple times. He elbowed a guy in the head earlier in the season, and somebody's gotten to him and said, look, you're too good of a player now. This needs to stop, and it does, because he should be appreciated for the player that he's built himself into instead of us talking about this stuff.
Well, the first time he gets his face beaten in next year by somebody who took umbrage with it, I guess the lesson gets learned then, literally,
Probably.
Because that's going to happen. I mean, around the league, you're not going to go into a corner with him and have your face licked. Literally, right? It's it's one of the weirder. I haven't talked to many people about it because it's just beyond gross. But I did want to point that up since you kicked me in the nuts and our team's in last place and we're not going to take a baseball game here that matters and we're going to deal away all of our players and you're going to come laugh at us when you're trying to figure out whether you're going to win 98 or 104. But
we'll always have Fenway South impact the place for those games.
Yeah. All right, man. Football season awaits. Always a pleasure, man. I wish you good fortune with what you're doing up there at Boston Sports Journal. We'll send everybody out to follow you guys along and out on Twitter as well. Greg, always good to visit with you, my friend.
Anytime, my friend.
Keep the faith. Greg A. Bedard, that's Bedard. Don't confuse him with Eric Bedard. He's a better guy than that. He's at BSJ, that's Boston Sports Journal. That's his property up in Boston. Good stuff up there. They cover the Boston teams better than literally anyone on the inside, so go check them out. You can check me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. By downloading the TuneIn Radio app, we do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world that you are. The morning newspaper ships at 7 a.m. each and every morning. All brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life guaranteed. And don't forget, each and every morning, the Pimlico entries. Now, it'll be Laurel next month, but Pimlico for the rest of the month. And they're getting the mud off the track over there and getting ready for Justify. We're going to be running a Belmont bus. Email me if you're interested. It'll be up in the road trips tab at WNST.net as well if you want to go to Belmont and see the coronation of Justify. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? A lot of horses coming back to beat Bob Baffert up in Elmont, New York on the 9th of June. Also, our Ray Lewis trip to the Canton, Ohio Hall of Fame. Baseball games in Cleveland and Pittsburgh, as well as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And our trip to Nashville for my 50th birthday, October 14th, and the tour of the Jack Daniels Distillery, as well as our Charlotte trip in late October as well. All up at WNST.net. You can email me anytime, nasty at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on your Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget, if you want breaking news, you get that first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.